We speak now to KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Electoral Officer Ntombifuthi Masinga, who speaks to us on the state of readiness of the province heading into the elections. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Just if you could share with us the concerns about particularly threat levels of violence in the province.
We work very closely with the security establishments in this province. What happens before any major election event, they will categorize voting stations based on the intelligence at their disposal, and based on that, they will then deploy in line with the categorization of voting stations. At the moment, the focus has been on the voting stations where we experience challenges during the first registration weekend in November, and those have all been prioritized as high risk. So on that basis, we are quite comfortable that in all the areas where we had problems in November, there is sufficient deployment by the SAPS. Ordinarily, during registration, they don't have stated deployments. But if a voting station is categorized as high risk, then there will be stated deployments. Otherwise, members will be roving throughout the day and visiting all voting stations.
Of the voting districts in the province, how many have been identified as hotspot areas with high risk levels?
So far is the number that we had during the first registration weekend, which out of a total of over 4,900 voting stations, it was a figure of below 20. And it was fluctuating between 10 and 20 throughout the registration weekend. So those are still categorized as high risk, but on the eve of the event, we will get the final briefing from the security establishments, and the figure may decrease or may increase based on the intelligence at their disposal.
The form of political violence that has through the years been expected of KwaZulu-Natal has been really situated in terms of ethnic violence or political contestation between the IFP and ANC. But just looking back at last year alone, for instance, the number of political killings that are said to be politically motivated has continued to escalate. How we frame the violence that is prevalent now, how much has it changed since the dawn of democracy?
What is happening now is that in as much as we have seen political killings in this province, most of the information at our disposal is that some of it is within political parties as compared to what we experienced in the early 90s, where we saw conflict between political parties. Most of what we see now is within political parties themselves, and that's quite a complicated situation to manage, even for the security establishments. But what we have seen over the years in the province, in as much as there will be those sporadic incidents of what is deemed political killings, we no longer have what we used to be called no-go areas in the province. There is actually free access by all political parties to various pockets of the province, which is something that we celebrate as a province. Even when we meet with political parties now, there is hardly a case where we will get reports that a political party was refused access to a particular community. We, however, do expect that as we get closer to elections, we will get reports where there is disputes over who booked a community hall first, and depending on the party that is in power in that municipality, you'll find that they will have monopoly over the facilities that are within that municipalities. But the intra-party conflicts at this stage, there is no evidence that whatever killings that have been observed in the province between political parties that are in conflict.
And there have been various studies on the root cause of the violence in KwaZulu-Natal, particularly also in the later years when you look at the crime statistics. But what we're seeing is the targeting of local government officials, including traditional leaders in KwaZulu-Natal. So, as I mentioned in the past, it was seen as a function of the transition from the apartheid system. South Africa finds itself at what has been described as watershed elections now, is there a second transition that is driving the wave of violence in KwaZulu-Natal?
All of it at this stage, until there are convictions on people that are currently being investigated as suspects in some of these killings, it's difficult to say exactly what is happening. What we are picking up, though, is that there is a link that has been reported also by the security establishments, that the contestation at local government level in the advent of coalition governments seem to have been increasing. You can then speculate that it could be because everyone sees it as a possibility that if they can lose one or two politicians from the opposition parties, they are closer to gaining outright majority in that municipality. And again, I would say that remains speculation, because until we have got people who have been convicted and found guilty of that sort of crime, we cannot neatly link it to coalition governments and hung municipalities in the province.
Figures looking at from the year 2000 to 2021 said there were about 1,971 assassinations in South Africa. 98% of those were committed using firearms. Just to go deeper into this and trying to foresee the planning for the IEC, the dim economic conditions that the country is facing, we saw led to the 2021 riots, of which the report was released yesterday. But there's also been the continual discovery of buried armed caches from the liberation struggle. From a security standpoint, how are you going to plan around this? Because criminality is also a factor. So it does seem to present various scenarios.
Absolutely. Our planning processes with the security establishments in this province start pretty early. We don't wait until the eve of the elections. Based on whatever information that they have at their disposal, we already are in discussions, even through the national joints as the commission, to look at the policy strategy for KwaZulu-Natal in light of everything that is going on in the province. So we are quite confident that the security establishments in this province, based on the analysis that they continuously do in terms of everything that's going on in our province, we are confident that they have a plan in place. And what we saw in previous elections is that we saw reinforcements from other provinces as well, because if you look at the number of the SAPS members in the province, which is around 10,000, and think about the close to 5,000 voting stations that we have during elections, and the normal policing duties that they have to continue performing in the midst of elections, it is to be expected that they will require reinforcement from outside of the province. So that's part of the plan already, which will get tightened up as we get closer to the election, so that we deal with both the policing of the election itself, but also continuously monitor the other crime that may impact adversely on the delivery of elections in the province.